And, before World War II, I think a lot of people would never have thought that it would be possible for an organization like the UN to be formed immediately after the war. But what would normally have taken 50 or 60 years happened in a matter of 2 or 3 years. And so under crisis circumstances, things move forward much more quickly. And that's why I'm particularly watching the climate change conference that will be taking place November 30th through December 11th in Paris, France. All of the world's top leaders will be there to sign this international treaty. And right now I expect Obama to sign it. I know the Pope is behind it. He launched the campaign officially on September 25th in his keynote address at the United Nations. That was the official launching of the final push to bring about this climate change treaty. So he's all in. Obama's all in. The leaders of Europe are in. So I'd be surprised if it is not ratified. And that, to me, more than anything that has happened since World War II, will be taking a giant step into world government, and things would move forward much more quickly from that point on, in my opinion.
If you've just joined me, my guest for the hour is Gary Cobb, and we're playing off an article that he has written, Obama and the Pope, and sort of the conclusion, of the article, but also this program, is that climate change is going to be the vehicle for global government. Few of these folks are really, truly concerned about the climate, but they are very concerned about a one-world type of governmental system, and what the case we're making is those behind it include, well, from the very top, Barack Obama, Pope Francis, and so many, many, many people underneath these gentlemen.
As we were talking about World War II, and Gary was kind of going through the chronology there, it's not for the same reasons, but, I think we could say that Bible-believing Christians are kind of in the same shoes as the Jews were at that point in time, only in the fact that we are the problem. We are the Neanderthals, many of us who understand first what the Bible says about the world, that, God is going to create a new heaven and a new earth and do away with this current earth. People are just in love with the planet, and that's part of it, but of course they're in love with the power they get out of being the lords over the planet, and that's where the rulers of the New World Order will be. But we are the problem. We are going to be looked at. I've heard now open calls for people who say, and this came, I believe, from the president, if you don't believe in climate change, that you're now the issue. People are saying that those who speak out against global warming as a fallacy, or say that it is a fallacy, ought to be arrested. There ought to be a law against us. I mean, that's how it's gotten. And this has happened so quickly. And that, again, like we said earlier, is the birth pangs that are happening. The birth pangs are taking place. They're getting closer and closer together. And it's going to be more emphatic as time moves on by those who want to push through the one world order.
Well, I'd like to move on to another issue or two, if I could. And I think we've tried to cover anyway, at least how Barack Obama and Pope Francis sort of played hand in glove back in late September, and some of the meetings at the United Nations went on into October, and they were really, the ultimate discussion was about, as we have said throughout the hour, is the forming of global government. But Gary, you write about some other issues in this article, including Middle East issues, and of course we cover those extensively on this program. It seems that the Pope and Barack Obama agree on Middle East issues. Why don't you take it from there, because you've written extensively about it in this particular newsletter that we're referring to.
Well, Obama and the Pope on numerous occasions have publicly declared their support for a two-state solution in which the Jewish state would have to return to its pre-1967 borders. Those are the boundaries that existed before the Six-Day War, in which Israel was attacked by her neighbors. And then, of course, after winning that war, Israel rightfully kept the land that it had gained. It did so as a defensive measure, a type of buffer should future invasions occur. And so to give back what it gained during that war, which, if it did so, at one point in Israel, I believe the country would only be 8 miles wide, something like that, no more than 12 miles.
That's
I know
right.
that. It was just a narrow strip. It would be virtually impossible for Israel to defend herself. And Bibi Netanyahu, as I wrote in my article, would have to be out of his mind to go along with something like that, especially under the current circumstances where they're completely surrounded by hostile forces. Islamic jihadists in the Sinai, Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, and of course we know what's going on in Syria, and some of that's beginning to bleed bleed over into Jordan. The king of Jordan has his hands more than full right now. He's already met with Obama 2 or 3 times saying, look, I need help. I can't hold this back. And so far little has taken place to help him. And then, of course, you have now Hamas in Gaza, which for a number of weeks now has declared, in essence, a holy war against Israel, telling all of the Palestinians living in the West Bank to go after Jews, stab them, kill them, do whatever you have to. And it's gotten really nasty over there. We just got an email from a good friend of ours who's holding down a sister office of ours in Jerusalem. And right now it's not safe in the streets. You don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's unusual because typically even during a wartime situation,
right,
you're safer in Israel than you are in most big cities in the United States. But right now, things are unpredictable, and Bibi Netanyahu is at his wit's end. You know, he gave a speech at the United Nations when he was here, an excellent speech, and I excerpted part of that in my article, too. He made some very bold statements, basically saying to the UN, when are you going to stop bashing Israel? This year alone, you've passed 20 resolutions against Israel, only one against the extremists in Syria. And in the past, it's been the same way with Hamas. The UN rarely says anything against these hostile forces, but consistently comes down against Israel. So the deck is stacked.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the middle of all this, to bring it back around, you've got our president, Obama, and Pope Francis pushing for an agreement where Israel will have to give up all the important lands that it needs to defend itself from these hostile forces. So you get to the point really where you have to ask yourself, are these men really this incredibly naive or stupid, or is there really a sinister element here? And I personally have come to the point where I've concluded that these individuals are too smart not to know better. Mm-hmm. I believe they have decidedly set themselves against Israel and against the Jewish people, regardless of what they say publicly. And I know they are smooth talkers, but I believe the future will bear this out. And so our friends in Israel, they're really going to have to get used to standing alone here in the near future, because I don't believe that the U.S. and certain other forces are going to stand behind them the way they have in the past.
Let me just quote you here, because again, you write this. You say, what are the consequences of Israel standing virtually alone? Its isolation will serve to further destabilize the Middle East by increasing the chances of a greater regional conflict. The Iran nuclear agreement almost assures that Israel will launch a preemptive strike. If it does, all the terrorist elements surrounding Israel will come against her: Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, etc., ISIS. The one thing these parties hold in common, besides their Islamic faith, is the goal of destroying Israel. And then you say this, and this is very important. You say, I personally believe that such a crisis will be used to make the case for a new world order in the aftermath of a massive destruction and loss of life. Israel would win the war, but the world would hate her for doing so and would do everything possible to work against her. The stage would be set for the Antichrist to introduce world government claiming to bring lasting peace.